Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're doing better than my microphone is. You may notice a little bit of a change from yesterday. I'll get that sorted out for tomorrow, but we're good to go. We're here. If you're tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. Sam and Christelle and Leslie, Carol, Steve, Ralph, General Kenobi, Anika, Susan, great to see all of you. Day number 2 of the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge is upon us. It's gonna be a fun one. We're gonna get into some neon effects. So let's go ahead and hop over to my screen. If you haven't participated just yet, head on over to behance.net/challenge/Photoshop. You get all the information about these challenges. Here's how it works. Every single day you're going to receive a challenge, Monday to Friday, except that first Monday, which is our kickoff show. Every day it's a bit different. Sometimes they build upon each other, sometimes they're completely different. These ones are more or less different. We will be using some techniques from previous challenges to take part in newer ones, but for the most part they don't build upon each other this time around. You can join us in our Discord community chat, which I'll get to in just a moment. You can watch us live, again, Monday to Friday. I'm live 9 o'clock Pacific time with these challenges. And then finally, you can share your work, either on Behance using the keyword Photoshop or PS Daily Challenge, or on Discord. If I hop over here, we're on Discord. And we have a lot of different channels. You can ask questions about Photoshop, share tips and tricks, just talk amongst the community, get information about the challenges, but more importantly, if you are participating, head on over to the challenge channel and you can submit your work that you've been cranking through for these last few days. And some people are already submitting amazing work using select and mask. They're adding in backgrounds, butterflies, and really interesting effects. This one is just great with a dog head on a race car driver. Some pretty good stuff in there. So definitely submit your work. We have some mentors and moderators who are in there all the time, making sure that everything's great and giving feedback, which is really important. And if you do feel comfortable, definitely give some feedback to the community as well. All right, so yesterday we started off this process exploring select and mask in Photoshop. We extracted reusable elements from photographs and we added backgrounds, learned how various techniques from the magic wand tool, quick selection, all sorts of things. And today we're going to be using some of that as well to explore glow effects. We're going to be adding neon lighting to photographs using glow effects, as it says here. So go ahead and hit that Get Started button to download the starter file. If you want to re-watch this video later on, without the mess up at the beginning, press the watch video button down here and you'll be able to do that. All right, let's hop over to Photoshop and we are going to get going. So once you've downloaded the template, this is what you're going to see. Over to the left, we have an intro card with a bit of a prompt. Again, today's challenge is to add neon lighting to a photo using glow effects. So we're going to be using layer styles for this. And then to the right over here, we have an image you can start with. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I would definitely encourage you all to use your own images if you have them. If we get through this image here, I'm going to show you how to use another image to achieve a very similar effect. But if you have images, definitely use those. If not, you can use this one here, or you can hop over to Adobe Stock. And there's a completely free section. So you can hop in here and search for something like portrait, something like this. And there's a ton of different portraits that you can use. Now, for this type of effect, usually a darker background works really well, which is why we're starting with this image. So this image here, for example, would work great. This one will look pretty good. This one would be a little bit more difficult because the layer styles that we're going to be adding really rely on darker backgrounds and sometimes even rely on kind of messy and very distracting backgrounds. And we might see that in the second example if we get there. So keep that in mind if you are using your images of your own. All right, Robert and Bruce and Gareth and RB and D, and great to see Marsha. Great to see everyone in the chat. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start creating the actual shape that we're gonna be using for this neon effect. First example is gonna be kept very simple. But if you do feel comfortable, definitely get a little bit creative. So in the tools bar to the left, I'm gonna go ahead and hop into my shapes. We've got rectangles and ellipses and triangles and polygons, all sorts of fun stuff, and even custom shapes, which we'll be getting into in another challenge. But I'm gonna start off with a good old triangle. So I'm gonna select that. I'm gonna draw one out. If you want to constrain it to a perfect triangle, I forget what the actual mathematical term is, but you can hold down Shift and it's gonna constrain that, but I'm not too concerned. So I'll do something like this, a little bit elongated. And by default, based on the settings that I've previously used, it applied a purple fill and a black border. Now, in this case, we probably don't want equilateral. Thank you, Carol, that is the one. You can tell I didn't do very well at math. So in this example, we don't necessarily want a fill. So what I'm gonna do is inside of the properties inspector over here to the right. And if you don't have, sorry, not the properties inspector, the properties panel. I'm used to working in Adobe XD where it's an inspector versus a panel. So over in the properties panel, if you don't have this, under the window menu, you can go down to properties and you can activate it. You can also select the shape tool again, and you can access those properties at the top as well. But in the properties panel, I'm gonna go ahead and simply turn off the fill, boop, just like that. And for the stroke, we're gonna set the stroke to a pure white. Now you can either do that with your recently used colors, or you can open the color picker and choose white. And I'm gonna bump up the stroke value. Let's try, I don't know, let's try about 15. We'll see what that looks like. The nice thing about this process is it's gonna be completely non-destructive. So we can adjust the stroke, we can adjust the layer styles, all that stuff a little bit later on. All right, that looks pretty good. And now we can start the process of actually adding some layer styles. So here's what we're gonna do. We have our triangle selected inside of the layers panel. We're gonna double click on the triangle. Rick is asking, is Adobe removing 3D from Photoshop going forward? That's a good question. I don't know. I do know we have many 3D applications, especially the ones from Substance that recently came in. Those are absolutely more suitable for 3D, but I don't know personally the status of the 3D in Photoshop. I'm kind of disconnected from that side of the world right now. So we want to double click on this layer, but we don't want to double click on the text, because that will allow us to change the name of the layer. So we want to double click in this empty space over here to the right. So if I double click, we're going to bring up our layer styles. I'm going to move this over. And here's where we can start really getting into the nitty-gritty of this effect. And there's a few ways we can go about this, but I'm going to start with an outer glow, right? And this will allow us to really make it glow a little bit. It's gonna kind of get us in the right direction, and then we can start adding some additional elements that'll really bring it home. Now, I do have some settings from my testing and previous examples, but in here, you can definitely experiment with the blend modes, and that's really how this glow is gonna interact with the image and the colors and the shapes in the background. And a lot of this will come down to what's back there. So your image is going to be different than mine, probably, right? So I would encourage you to experiment. But if we're going for a very glowing, bright look, I would probably stick in this section here, from lighten probably down to hard mix. You probably want to avoid darken to dark color. Those are more for, you know, the darker tones, right? So something like color dodge could work well. It's a little bit subtle. And if we want to go for something like a pink or purple, we can bump up the opacity, and you can kind of see what it's doing, right? It's having some nice interactions with some of those elements back there. Linear dodge is pretty good. It's a little bit stronger. Screen is not bad either. And again, definitely experiment, right? Then you can start really tweaking the size and the spread. So size is essentially how much it glows, right? How far it kind of pushes out and how blurry it is, right? So if I crank this up a lot, it's going to be much blurrier, but the actual glow is not going to be as strong. And in some cases, you might want that, right? So definitely experiment. And spread will kind of bump it out a little bit. And that's kind of neat right there, right? It might be a little bit overdone, but it could work. We'll experiment. Contour, probably don't need to adjust, but you can definitely experiment with this a little bit. There's some interesting, oh, you know what? It's not bad, right? I'm just using the arrow keys on my keyboard. We'll stick with a simple contour right now, and then maybe we'll come back to that and revisit. The next thing I might want to add to really emphasize this glow is possibly a drop shadow. Now you might be thinking drop shadow, that's that dark shape underneath an object that makes it pop from the background. Typically, yes, right? But we can also use it as a glow. So you can see here we have a drop shadow now. If I turn off outer glow for a second, we can do something very similar, right? So we can choose, let's say, linear dodge, or what do we have for outer glow? Yeah, we had linear dodge. So we can choose linear dodge here. We can essentially apply very similar effects. We can bump up the size, tweak the color a little bit, maybe increase the spread just a touch, and now we have a nice outer glow. So a lot of these could definitely come into play. You can use outer glows, you can use drop shadows, you can use both, you can use 2 drop shadows, right? Right beside here, you can press the plus button to add an additional drop shadow, which is really nice. So I can also turn that outer glow back on, and you're going to see it kind of emphasized it. And this is where you can really start experimenting with things. So maybe I'll drop the size a little bit, and I can also change the color. So now it's kind of blending that blue and that pink that we had on that drop shadow to create a really interesting effect. Yeah, RB is saying contours are good for double glows. Yes, so like I kind of showed earlier, if I hop back in here and I start going through this, you can really see if you choose the right ones and you experiment with the range values, there's some interesting effects going on. It kind of has this fun, it's not really a lens flare, but it's a drop all the shadows, Noor says. Yes, I agree. So let's stick with this for a moment. And then one more thing I might want to add is an inner shadow, right? Now, obviously on this shape here, this essentially will be the light, that kind of the bulb, right? And in most cases, it's pure white, it's very bright, but there might be a little bit of a spill from the glow around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable an inner shadow. Let me zoom on in here so we can see. It's a little bit pixelated because it is a raster image, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just very subtly increase the size, just so we have a little bit of spill on this shape. So if I turn off the inner shadow and then turn it back on, and you can also use an inner glow as well. For the most part, those two could be interchangeable, right? Inner shadow, inner glow. Some of them do have different options, but in this case, it's interchangeable. And just like RB said, you can also experiment with the contours to get different effects, right? In this case, probably won't notice much of a difference. This one's a bit sharper, but then again, you can achieve the same effect with, it kind of looks like a lightsaber. It does. It really, I mean, you can definitely make a lightsaber. And I would encourage you, if you feel comfortable, take a picture of yourself holding up like a lightsaber type thing and add one in there using this technique. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK and zoom on out. And we now have a bit of a neon triangle going on, right? It's not perfect just yet. Neon though cannot have such sharp corners, RB is saying. It's an interesting observation, and you're probably right. I don't know enough about neon to know, but what you can do is the following. So I have the shape selected inside of the properties panel, like I was showing earlier where the fill and stroke are. Right over here, you can round out those corners. So let's try maybe 8. And now we have rounded corners. You can also experiment with caps and the joints, right? I can increase this a little bit more, 16 possibly, and now they're rounded. Now, of course, this is a photo composition, it's not supposed to be real life, so we could go for sharp corners if we want to, but of course, you can round them out. So, good suggestion, RD. All right, so we have this triangle with rounded corners now and this glow effect. It looks okay, but it's kind of missing something, right? The entire thing is in front of this musician, it's blocking his face, it's just not there yet. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be using some of the techniques. Can you over them, is the music too loud? Let me drop that a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna be using some of the techniques from yesterday to help put this triangle behind this musician. So I'm gonna hide him for a moment. I'm gonna make sure that this background layer is selected, just like that. And with my W key, I'm going to access either the quick selection tool, the magic wand tool, it doesn't matter which one. And at the top, we're going to use select subject. So I'm going to click on that, and Photoshop is going to do a very good job at selecting this musician. It's not perfect, but I can always grab my magic wand or quick selection and just add in a little bit there. But we're not too concerned about a perfect selection in this case. We just want something really rough that will help us put that triangle back there. So if I go ahead and turn this back on, I still have the selection in place. What I want to do is apply a layer mask. Now you're going to remember from yesterday, if I simply click, it's essentially going to mask out everything that, it's going to show everything that was in the selection and hide everything outside, which we don't want in this case. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to hold down Alt-Option. The music is still loud. Oh no. Hold on. It's probably because my microphone is not working correctly, but that should do it. I lowered it in iTunes too, or music, whatever it's called now. All right, so I held down Alt-Option and I clicked, and it allowed me to basically apply the reverse layer mask. So anything inside of the selection would be hidden, anything outside will be visible. But we want some of that to be kind of coming through. Maybe the one at the top, right? We want to keep hidden, but down here we might want to reveal that. So if I hop into the layer mask right over here, grab my brush, shortcut key B, make sure it's set to white so I can press X to swap it, and I'm simply going to go over here and paint this back in, right? And if I wanted to get a little bit more fancy, I can also experiment, switch over to black, and maybe paint this area out so it kind of goes behind that guitar. And then it pops out this side right over here. Something like that. Look at that. It kind of wraps around there. There we go. And it just gives us this really nice looking effect, which is kind of cool. And I can also do something like this. Maybe I can reveal this, possibly. And there we go. Now, it goes even further than this, right? If you take a look at this guy's face, we have this very bright neon effect on the left-hand side, or I guess the right-hand side of his face, but it's not really reflecting on his skin. So what we can do is we can apply an additional layer. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer down at the bottom of the layers panel. And what I want to do is grab a very bright pinkish purple color, somewhere in this area here, right? And I'm going to grab my brush just like I did before. I want to make sure that the hardness is set to 0. So all I did with the brush tool, shortcut key B, I right-clicked to access this panel, or you can access it right here at the top left-hand corner as well. I'm going to make it nice and large, and I'm simply going to, outside of his face, I'm simply going to click very subtly, just to add a little bit of glow over there, and might also go down his jacket as well. Now, you might be thinking, this is looking strange. It's just like blobs in the background. What we want to do is we actually want to use the same layer mask that we applied on this image here, but we want to reverse it, right? So I can go ahead and actually hold down Alt-Option and drag that layer mask onto this shape, right? Again, we want to reverse it. So I'm going to click on this, Command and Control I to reverse it. And now it's applied that glow, that brush that we just created, right, on his face and on his jacket. Now, it's not blending that well, as you can see in this area here. And that's where blend modes come into play one more time. Just like we were showing in the layer styles, we can also hop in here, and these update in real time as you move over them. So something like soft light, possibly, it'll just leave us with a very subtle glow on his face. And I can grab my brush and refine this a little bit more if I needed to. Something like that. There we go. I can do that on the other side. Again, I want to keep it very subtle. I don't want to go too crazy with this. And then if I wanted to, I can also do it on, his guitar, for example. Just, again, very subtle. And if you take a look at that, now it's looking a little bit more natural. So if I turn off this brush effect and turn it back on, again, very subtle, but it just kind of adds to that realism. And you can definitely experiment with the various blend modes. Overlay could work as well. It's a little bit more harsh, but that might be the effect that you're going for. and I can brush in his hair a little bit. Just give him a little bit of highlights up here. Possibly even on his hand. Right, there we go. Oops, let me brush out some of that. Perfect. And like I mentioned earlier, all of this is completely non-destructive. So if you did not like the double glow effect with that contour from before, you can always double click right over here. This was, I believe, the outer glow possibly. And you can experiment with the contours one more time, right? So you can always go back and make some changes. You can experiment with the different colors. I kind of like that blue though, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. And because we have that layer mask, we can always jump in here and maybe just remove a little bit of this so we don't have too much of that glow. But I think it looks pretty good. There we go. Now, one more thing I do want to show is, you might be asking, how do we rotate this triangle if we wanted maybe a different angle? Now, if you were to simply take this shape as it is right now and show transform controls at the top and then rotate it, we're going to have these random gaps, which we don't necessarily want. So what you want to do is actually turn off the link. So you want to break the link between the shape, in this case it's a vector shape, and layer mask. And now when you rotate it, that layer mask stays in place. Now, we didn't apply the layer mask everywhere, but you can definitely tell at the top we still have that layer mask in place. So we can still rotate this. We can even move it a little bit, right? And we have a brand new look, right? And then we can just dive into the mask again, make a few small changes, and we're good to go. So we don't have to deal with those gaps in the layer mask like we did before. All right, so that's gonna wrap it up. Definitely experiment on your own. Here's another example of what you can do, by extracting an image using yesterday's techniques, applying a background behind it, and applying very similar neon glow effects. You can also hop over to this document. I can copy this layer style, copy layer style, hop over here. Let's actually get rid of one of these. And I can paste the layer style. I can clear it, and then where's paste? Paste the layer style. So if I'm working on one already, and I just want to bring that over, you can copy and paste, and then you can make some changes as needed. So a big thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. I apologize again for the microphone problem. I will definitely fix that for tomorrow. Stick around. In just a few moments, we have, who do we have? Lauren Jones coming up. So stick around for that. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I will see you all tomorrow.